Chapter 580. Message. He raised his head, looking at the ethereal light that covered the entire city above him. Those were the Fengdu laws he had left behind. He extended his hand, gently grasping at the sky. The Fengdu laws, which had protected the entire city from the mist and the gods, quickly condensed towards the top, transforming into a ghostly sphere that slowly fell into Li Diang's hand. As he lightly closed his palm, the ethereal light merged into his body. He took a deep breath, and an incredibly profound imperial might surged from within him. The oil-stained military coat gradually transformed into a black imperial robe, with golden patterns intertwining, moving without wind. The stubbled face revealed an imposing demeanor, and his entire aura began to undergo a remarkable transformation. Witnessing this scene, Qin Han and Lu Yu simultaneously widened their mouths. The pressure emanating from Li Diang was something they had felt several times in the mist. This kind of pressure belonged to a deity. Moreover, the ethereal light swirling around him was identical to the Fengdu laws that had shrouded the broken city outside. Qin Han Sr. Lu Yu stammered, "Who is this?" Qin Han stared blankly at everything, unable to utter a word. "I am Qin Han, captain of the Night Watchman Team 332 stationed in Anta County." Li Diang, draped in the imperial robe and exuding immense authority, spoke in a deep voice. Qin Han instinctively stood up straight. "Yes. From now on they will be entrusted to you." He extended his hand, pointing at the sleeping citizens in the city behind him, while the corners of his mouth slightly lifted. "And welcome home." In the palm of the Fengdu Emperor, a deep glow suddenly flashed, and at the same time, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared in his hand, a circular ring instantly enveloping the entire city. In the next moment, the ring contracted, and the entire floating city vanished from sight. When Qin Han and Lu Yu regained their senses, the figure of the Fengdu Emperor had already disappeared. The broken city that had been floating in the air had unknowingly returned to the ground, and the original city gap before them had vanished without a trace. The half of the city taken by the wind god had instantaneously traversed space, flashing from the eastern sea border to the northern border, reuniting with the other half of the city. Above them there was no longer the ghostly laws, but a clear blue sky. This city had returned to where it belonged. Chaotic footsteps approached from behind. Lu Yu turned around to see several awakened residents walking out of the underground parking lot, looking around in confusion, seemingly unable to accept the scene before them. "Senior Qin Han, they are awake," Lu Yu exclaimed in shock. Qin Han gazed at the spot where Li Diang had stood, and after a moment, a bitter smile appeared on his face. "What a huge surprise. That half of the city has returned?" At the entrance of the Night Watchman's special ward, Yi Fan suddenly stood up from his seat upon hearing the voice on the other end of the phone. "Where is Zhou Ping? Where is he?" he asked urgently. "After the Sword Saint killed the god, he ascended to the Tao." Yi Fan gripped the phone, feeling as if he had been struck by lightning, frozen in place. Captain Qin Han of Team 332 brought back his heart. He said that Lin Chia, the captain of the 5th Special Team, mentioned that as long as this heart is here, the Sword Saint has a chance of resurrection. Upon hearing this, Yi Fan's eyes narrowed. "Where is the 5th Special Team?" "They are missing." "Missing?" Qin Han said that just before reaching the Great Xia border, they saw a figure on a small boat on the sea. After they entered the mist, they never returned. Yi Fan. On the other end of the line, Suiqing's voice was filled with concern. Yi Fan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone tightly. After a long silence, he hoarsely replied, "I understand. Suiqing, take those things and Zhou Ping's heart, and wait for me at Juhua Mountain." "Yi Fan, are you really?" "Do as I say." Before Suiqing could say anything else, Yi Fan hung up the phone. Sitting beside him, Jin Yan raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Yi Fan turned his head, looking at her with an unprecedented seriousness. "Just say what you need to say, don't keep staring at me," Jin Yan said, feeling uneasy under his gaze. Yi Fan took a deep breath. "Jin Yan, I'll ask you one last time, can you not leave?" When Yi Fan said this, his tone was extremely serious, causing Jin Yan to momentarily forget to retort. She fell silent for half a second before responding earnestly, "I can't." Yi Fan sighed. "I understand. So what exactly happened?" "Nothing." Yi Fan glanced at Qin Fuzi, who had been pushed out of the emergency room and was now out of danger, shook his head and turned to walk alone towards the hospital exit. If you really don't plan to stay, you can leave. Creak. After saying this, he reached out and pushed open the door to the corridor, his figure disappearing behind it. Jin Yan watched Yi Fan's departing back, frowning, a look of confusion appearing on her face. After hesitating for a moment, she stood up, hands tucked into the tattered black cloak, and stepped towards the other side of the corridor. Bang! A loud explosion echoed, faint arcs of electricity and flames danced in Guanzai's grasp, falling to the ground along with the smoke-filled phone. Guanzai's eyes were bloodshot. Zhou Ping. He murmured to himself. In the front seat of the electric bike, Lu Wuwei, holding the handlebars, remained silent for a moment before slowly saying, I think you need to calm down. Guanzai's hands were clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms, leaving traces of blood. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Where is Yi Fan? Despite his efforts to suppress his voice, Lu Wuwei could still clearly hear the burning anger in his chest. Lu Wuwei paused. I don't know. Bullshit. Guanzai shouted in a low voice. Who can escape your forbidden ruins tracking? You can hunt down Loki, yet you can't find Yi Fan. Lu Wuwei silently rode the bike, not saying a word. Guanzai took another deep breath. Do you really think I would be reckless enough to kill Yi Fan for Zhou Ping's revenge? I'm angry. But that doesn't mean I'm foolish. I just want to find him, and then confront him face to face. Lu Wuwei was taken aback and tentatively asked, Really just a confrontation? Guanzai was silent for a moment. I might also uncontrollably beat him up, but I will definitely not kill him. Lu Wuwei nodded. All right, I'll take you to find him. Chapter 581. The Faded Buddha. Mount Jiuhua. The sound of Buddhism lingers and sandalwood incense wafts gently. A figure draped in a dark red cloak with a straight sword at his waist ascends the straight stone steps, step by step, towards the temple at the summit, shrouded in the echoes of sacred chants. He steps onto the last stone slab and slowly comes to a halt. In front of the ancient and majestic temple, Yi Fan stands silently for a long time before finally taking a step forward and entering the temple. Yi Fan. Sui Qing, who had been waiting in the temple for a long time, stood up from the steps in front of the main hall, his brow furrowed. He opened his mouth to say something, but Yi Fan raised his hand to stop him and calmly asked, Have you brought everything? Sui Qing's lips trembled slightly and after a moment he nodded, I brought it. My master should still be in seclusion, right? Master Jinchuan is still repairing the source of the heavenly court and is not here. Good. Yi Fan nodded, his gaze fixed on the Buddha statue in the main hall. Taking a deep breath, he slowly said, Seal the mountain. No one is allowed to enter. Yi Fan, I think, even if you want to do this, you could wait a little longer. Sui Qing couldn't help but say. Yi Fan shook his head. There's no time to wait. After the transformation, the soul will be absorbed into the laws and merge with the laws of the world itself. It is estimated that from the moment the soul begins to merge with the laws to the point of complete entrapment, this process takes at most 24 hours. Right now, Zhou Ping's soul should have been devoured for nearly 3/4. If we delay any longer, he will never return. Yi Fan turned his head to look at the center of the main hall, at the black heart quietly resting within the black coffin and the ancient dragon elephant sword, determination flashing in his eyes. Guanzhong is right, I owe Zhou Ping too much. Now, it is time to repay that debt. Sui Qing's brow furrowed tightly. He knew he couldn't stop Yi Fan today. After much internal struggle, he could only close his eyes and let out a helpless sigh. Sui Qing, after today you know what to do. Yi Fan reached out and patted the troubled Sui Qing on the shoulder, smiling slightly. What I can do you can do too. I believe in you. I will do my best. Sui Qing forced a bitter smile. Yi Fan stepped forward, climbed the steps in front of the hall, crossed the threshold and walked straight into the Buddha hall. With a low creaking sound, the doors of the Buddha hall slowly closed. The dark red figure stood before the black coffin, raising his head to face the many magnificent Buddha statues in the hall, his silhouette gradually disappearing into the crack of the door. Bang! With a dull thud, the Buddha hall was completely shut. The temple atop Mount Jiuhua fell into a deep silence. Sui Qing stared at the tightly closed door for a long time, shook his head and walked to the last stone step in front of the temple, slowly sitting down. He gazed at the drifting white clouds before him and the towering mountains beneath his feet, lost in thought. Inside the Buddha hall, Yi Fan shifted his gaze from the many Buddha statues to the black coffin before him, where the heart wrapped in the night and the ancient dragon elephant sword lay quietly. On top of this coffin rested a string of dim ancient prayer beads, the surface of which bore fine cracks. These patterns intertwined, hinting at some great path shrouded in mystery. Yi Fan did not know how Lin Chia had preserved Zhou Ping's heart, nor did he understand what Lin Chia meant by giving Zhou Ping a chance to be reborn. If Lin Chia were here, he would definitely ask him. Unfortunately, the entire 5th Special Team had already gone missing. Yi Fan was unsure of the heart's purpose, but that did not hinder him from executing the plan he had already set in motion. At that moment, 6 streams of mysterious yellow energy coalesced from the void, transforming into 6 figures radiating a faint golden light, standing within the Buddha hall. Seeing these 6 figures, Yi Fan was momentarily taken aback, then respectfully spoke. "I am Yi Fan, greetings to Lord Champion, Lord Gongyang, Commander Nye, Commander Li, Commander Tang and Sister Wang." Noticing Wang Qing's brow raise, Yi Fan quickly corrected himself to call her sister. Upon hearing Yi Fan's change of address, Wang Qing's eyes immediately squinted into crescent moons. She turned to the others around her and said, "So what do you think? My chosen junior is not bad, right?" Wang Qing was the 4th Supreme Commander of the Night Watchers. When Yi Fan was still an ordinary Night Watcher, she was already at the pinnacle of humanity. Later, as Yi Fan rose through the ranks to become a high-ranking member of the Night Watchers, she became his direct superior, much like the current relationship between Yi Fan and Zhuo Qing. To her, Yi Fan was indeed a lovable junior. The other heroic spirits recognized Yi Fan but had never met him before, as they had long been in slumber within the national fortune. If it weren't for Yi Fan sending someone to awaken them, they would not have appeared in the mortal realm. Hu Tubing gazed at Yi Fan for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Not bad." Gong Yongwan noticed the prayer beads on the coffin and narrowed her eyes slightly. "The fate-transferring beads? You actually found this item." "I found it back then," Tang Yuxing, who was standing nearby in a white shirt, suddenly said. "Over 20 years ago, when we explored a certain underground relic in the southern mountains, we discovered this legendary forbidden item. Since then it has been sealed in the Night Watchers' headquarters and has never been used." Wang Qing nodded. "I participated back then as well." Hu Tubing squinted at the prayer beads, puzzled, and asked, "What is this?" During the Ming Dynasty, a young monk appeared who possessed an unprecedented forbidden ruin known as the Fate Buddha, capable of peering into, altering, distorting, or intertwining the threads of fate to a certain extent, Gong Yongwan explained. "In later generations, when we created the list of forbidden ruins, we classified it as Sequence 007, the second royal ruin, Fate Buddha," Tang Yuxing added. This monk was exceptionally gifted, but due to repeatedly altering the fates of others, his own fate fell into an uncontrollable vortex of destruction. For some unknown reason, he ultimately died. Gong Yongwan continued. After his death, his disciple cremated his body, and the power of the Fate Buddha, contained within him, coalesced into beads, becoming this forbidden item, the fate-transferring beads. Hu Tubing nodded after hearing this. "Little Yi Fan, what do you intend to do with this item?" Wang Qing asked, puzzled. Yi Fan remained silent for a moment, then replied, "To save someone." Gong Yongwan's brow furrowed slightly. This forbidden item, while powerful, cannot easily alter fate itself. The monk's fate is the best illustration of this. Even with this forbidden item, altering fate will come at a cost. "I know." Yi Fan raised his head, looking at them, and calmly said, "So I will use my life to exchange for his." Chapter 582. Exchange of Life. Swap lives. Tang Yuxing furrowed his brows. "Whose life do you want to swap?" Yi Fan fell silent. Wang Qing seemed to remember something. "When we awakened, we felt a brand new fluctuation of laws. Someone must have taken that step. Are you trying to save him?" "Yes." Yi Fan nodded. "He is the first sword immortal of Daxia who, after slaying the gods, transcended into the Tao." Nye Jinshan shook his head. "Transcendence is irreversible. Since he has already transcended, his soul will inevitably merge with the world's laws. Even if you swap lives with him, he won't be able to return. He hasn't fully merged with the world's laws yet. Yifan said firmly. Seeing the confusion in everyone's eyes, Yifan continued. 5 years ago, I established a special research team under the Night Watchers, using existing intelligent technology to simulate the situation of humanity after breaking the ceiling. After years of research, we have preliminarily deduced that the soul's transcendence after breaking the ceiling is not instantaneous. It is a process that requires time to integrate. We have calculated the speed of the soul's merging with the world's laws, which takes about 24 hours. Right now, he still has a quarter of his soul that hasn't been merged with the world's laws. After hearing Yifan's words, curiosity appeared in Tang Yuxing's eyes. Has technology developed to this extent now? But how did you come up with the idea to conduct this research? Yifan seemed to recall something, a smile unconsciously appearing at the corner of his mouth. Because that year I saw him. Yifan said, from the moment I laid eyes on him, I had a premonition that he would be the first to break the ceiling and reach that realm. So, after I returned from the local restaurant that day, I began to establish the research team, using him as a template to calculate the unknown possibilities. I wanted to pave the way for his future. Yifan lowered his head, looking at the heart in the coffin and the sword, and slowly spoke. He did it. He became the sword immortal of Daxia, slaying gods and transcending. Now it's my turn. Tang Yuxing seriously reminded him. Swapping lives means your soul will also completely merge into this life-transferring pearl. You won't be able to anchor your soul to objects, nor can you remain as the fifth commander of the Night Watchers, transforming into a heroic spirit to rest within the national fortune, nor can you enter reincarnation. You will be completely obliterated. I know. Is it worth it to use your own life to exchange for a quarter of his soul? Yes. Yifan said calmly. A quarter of the red dust sword immortal far exceeds any human ceiling. If my life can bring back a sword immortal for Daxia, then what does it matter if I am obliterated? Moreover, I owe him this. As Yifan's words fell, the entire Buddhist hall fell into a dead silence. The 6 heroic spirits looked at Yifan, who stood before the coffin, their eyes reflecting complex emotions. This calamity of Daxia has passed, but for humanity to truly stand up, we are still one step away. Yifan extended his hand, pointing at the heart in the coffin. That is him. Since I, Yifan, took on the role of the 5th commander of the Night Watchers, I have been paving the way for all of Daxia. Now that this path has been laid, we only lack the final stepping stone. This stepping stone is my life. I must complete everything I have prepared. I want to give Daxia a foothold in this dangerous and desperate foggy world, a place for humanity to settle. I want to let those outer gods know. Human strength can also triumph over heaven. Yifan clasped his hands into fists and deeply bowed to the 6 heroic spirits. My mind is made up. Please forgive me, esteemed seniors. Yifan grasped the string of prayer beads tightly, suddenly exerting force to crush them. The splintered beads pierced his flesh, creating deep wounds, and the ghastly bloodstains beneath the bead fragments began to burn strangely. Golden flames danced in the Buddhist hall, quickly spreading across his body. Under this fire, the dark red cloak turned into specks of golden ash, disappearing into the air. The heroic spirits silently watched this scene, not stepping forward to stop him. Since this was the path Yifan had chosen for himself, they could not interfere. This was the greatest respect for him. Outside the Buddhist hall, on the stone steps, an electric cart carried 2 people to the foot of Juhua Mountain. Lu Wei, dressed in a yellow delivery uniform, got out of the car, pulled out the key, locked the wheels, and looked up at the towering mountain. Guanzai stood silently at the foot of the stone steps, lifting the brim of his cap to gaze at the temple atop the mountain, his eyes narrowing slightly. Is he up there? Yes. Lu Wei nodded. Guanzai's brows furrowed tightly, his knuckles tapping in the air, lines of code swirling around him. His body sank slightly, then he suddenly exerted force with his feet. Boom. He shattered the step beneath him, his figure darting up the stone steps like a startled swan, leaving behind a trail of afterimages. Yifan. His roar echoed in the sky. Lu Wei pulled a small yellow duck from the drawer of the electric cart, slapped it onto his helmet and followed closely. Zuoqing, who was sitting on the last step in front of the temple, heard this voice, frowned slightly, then slowly stood up from the step. On the mountain path, two figures hurriedly approached along the stone road. Guanzai rushed up the stone steps, and in his eyes the temple grew larger and larger. Just then his brows also furrowed. At the end of the stone steps stood a young man draped in a dark red cloak, empty-handed, gazing down the mountain path, seemingly lost in thought. He stood at the temple's entrance like a gatekeeper. Guanzai stopped on the last few steps. "I recognize you. You're the high-ranking night watcher beside Yi Fan. Your name is..." Guanzai began to recall the young man's name. "S62," he said, "Director of the Special Operations Division of the Night Watchers, S62. Yi Fan is in the temple behind you." "That's right. Let me pass." "No." Upon hearing this response, Guanzai's brows furrowed even tighter. "Do you think you can stop me?" Guanzai's eyes narrowed, and the pressure of a human ceiling-level presence suddenly descended, instantly overwhelming the entire stone path. S62 bore this pressure without any change in expression. He stood quietly, slowly speaking. "I can't stop you, but I must." Boom. S62's body suddenly erupted with powerful pressure, colliding with Guanzai's mental force. The silent shockwave swept through the trees on both sides of the stone steps, causing them to rustle. Half-step human ceiling. Chapter 583. His game against God. Feeling the oppressive force emanating from S62, a look of surprise appeared in Guanzai and Lu Wei's eyes. At this moment, S62's realm was at the peak of the climb level, and he even showed signs of stepping into the human ceiling realm. They never expected that this unassuming young man who had always followed Yi Fan was actually a candidate for the ceiling. Guanzai was somewhat surprised, but that was all. The gap between Klein and the human ceiling was still too vast. Although S62 was only half a step away, that half step was enough for him to be defeated without a doubt. "You can't win against me," Guanzai shook his head. "I don't want to fight you. I just want to find Yi Fan and confront him directly." "You can't go over," S62 said firmly. "Why?" Guanzai asked somewhat angrily. S62 turned his head to look at the tightly closed Buddhist hall within the temple and slowly spoke. "Because he is exchanging lives for your brother." Inside the Buddhist hall, Yi Fan, bathed in golden flames, had burning eyes. Even though there were no visible wounds on his body, his soul was being consumed at an astonishing speed. Fatigue appeared in his gaze as he slowly crouched down, sitting cross-legged before the black coffin, his eyelids drooping. He raised his palm holding a few fragments of Buddhist beads, and pressed his hands together, sitting upright in the fire. The golden flames grew stronger, and in the firelight Yi Fan's clothes were almost completely burned away. The flames began to lick at his body, like a ravenous beast craving flesh and blood. With each flicker of the flames, large patches of skin were scorched to charcoal, falling away piece by piece. This fire was burning his clothes, his body, and his soul. This was the price of changing fate. Even with his body charred, there was no sign of pain on Yi Fan's face. As the blackened flesh fell away, it revealed another layer of bronze-colored skin, emanating a faint golden glow. That was the Buddha body Yi Fan cultivated. The black ashes from his burning hair and clothes danced in the empty Buddhist hall. The Buddha body Yi Fan sat with his hands pressed together before the coffin, his lips gently parted, and a soft Buddhist chant resonated throughout the temple. "With my body as the guide, with my life as the guide, with my soul as the guide." Wielding the sword to shape the body, merging heart and soul, embracing the great path, defying fate to change destiny. As his voice fell, a tidal wave of Buddhist light surged from within him, enveloping the black coffin before him. The dragon elephant sword was swallowed by the Buddhist light, and the shattered fragments of the Buddhist beads on the ground flew up, swirling around the sword. Ding! The dragon elephant sword trembled and a crisp dragon's roar echoed. Some sword techniques emerged from the void, drawn by the fragments of the Buddhist beads, gradually weaving a phantom figure beside the sword. Transforming the path was due to the inability of the human flesh to bear the power of the laws, leading to self-collapse. To guide Zhou Ping's soul and change his fate, it was necessary to first reshape a body capable of bearing the great path. And Yi Fan had been waiting for this day for a long time. His gaze sharpened as several black boxes, neatly arranged in the corners of the hall, suddenly exploded. Countless materials and forbidden object fragments were swept into the surging Buddhist light, flying to the sword and merging into the phantom figure. To bear the laws, the best vessel was naturally the laws themselves. Using the dragon elephant sword as the core, he drew upon the sword laws left by Zhou Ping to reshape a sword body for him. And a perfect body could not be achieved solely with the sword. So Yi Fan had also prepared a large number of materials capable of bearing the laws as support, creating the best container for his consciousness and soul. As these materials were filled in, the phantom body became increasingly solid, gradually evolving into Zhou Ping's original appearance. This was because the sword laws were originally left by Zhou Ping, containing basic information about his appearance, allowing it to automatically regenerate into his original likeness. He kept his eyes tightly closed, lying quietly in the Buddhist light, looking no different from before. This body was a fusion of science and mystery, a crystallization of human wisdom. Once this body was completed, the heroic spirit Hu Tsubing, who stood aside, suddenly moved. He raised the broken spear in his hand and slammed it heavily onto the ground of the Buddhist hall. In the next moment, a vast amount of yellow and black qi surged from the ground, flooding into the newly formed body like seawater. The national fortune was poured in. The other heroic spirits turned their heads in surprise, seeing the determination in Hu Tsubing's eyes, and immediately understood his intention. Each raised their divine weapons and struck the ground. The mighty and rolling national fortune surged from the ground like seawater, engulfing the body. It was continuously washed in the tide of national fortune, and its surface began to emit a dark golden glow. The tide of national fortune washed over this body for a full 3 minutes before slowly receding, and the golden light flowed over the surface of the body, resembling a piece of mysterious gold from the heavenly realm, extremely profound. The reshaping of the body was now complete. The Buddha body Yi Fan, sitting in the firelight, felt his consciousness gradually dissipating. His soul was nearly completely drained, teetering on the edge of collapse. But he still bit down hard on his tongue, forcing himself to gather his spirit and merge the last few fragments of Buddhist beads into his palm. "Return, soul," he shouted loudly. The body had been reshaped, and all that remained was to exchange the remaining quarter of Zhou Ping's soul from the laws of the world. The Buddhist light around him erupted, enveloping the entire peak of Juhua Mountain, and the fragments of the fate-changing pearl trembled violently. In a daze, he saw a figure in a black robe with a sword on his back slowly walking out from the Buddhist light. That was Zhou Ping's soul. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on his lips. He succeeded. Zhou Ping's soul had indeed not completely vanished. As he watched the figure approach, Yi Fan, who had burned the last trace of his soul, slowly closed his eyes in this sea of Buddhist light. At the moment his soul disappeared along with the fate-changing pearl, the pair of eyes that were about to close were tinged with a breath of fate. In that instant he saw in the future, dazzling stars rising from the earth, shining with their own light. Those were the new stars about to rise in the Great Xia, the future of this nation. Those were all the seeds he had sown. The smile on his lips grew wider. From now on the Great Xia will be worry-free. This round I Yi Fan have won. He murmured, closing his eyes. He stopped breathing. The flames gradually faded and the flying black ashes fell like snow. The golden Buddha body resembled a true Buddha statue, hands pressed together, sitting in the center of the hall. Before him was a black coffin, and in front of it was a door of the Buddhist hall facing the world. He faced the vast world outside the door, smiling like the midday sun spilling through the cracks of the door, warm and bright. The fifth commander-in-chief of the night watchman Yi Fan. At the peak of Juhua Mountain, smiling he sat in meditation. Chapter 584, The Seeds. Outside the main hall, Guan was frowning, looking at Suqing with confusion. Exchange life. What do you mean by exchange life? Suqing opened his mouth, about to explain something, when a brilliant Buddhist light suddenly enveloped the entire mountain peak, causing all three of them to involuntarily close their eyes. After the appearance of this Buddhist light, Suqing keenly sensed that a presence was rapidly fading away in the temple behind him. He turned his head, staring blankly at the tightly shut door of the main hall, as if he had lost his soul. Yi Fan, he murmured to himself. In the fasting area. Deep within the mental hospital. Little fish, did you eat today? Little grass, why are you sleeping again? Little stone. Why aren't you answering my question? A man in a blue and white striped patient uniform with a messy hairstyle squatted at the entrance of the fasting area, seriously staring at a few pebbles at his feet, muttering to himself. Suddenly he froze in place. He turned his gaze toward the distant sky, slowly standing up. Beneath his disheveled hair, his murky eyes revealed an unprecedented clarity. He placed one hand on his chest and spoke with a hint of melancholy. Why does my heart hurt? A transport plane roared across the sky. Captain, we're about to reach Huaihai City. It's time to jump. Kong Shang shook the seat next to him where Xia Siming was strapped in and sleeping like a dead pig, a look of helplessness in his eyes. She really sleeps too soundly, one team member said with a bitter smile. Isn't the captain always like this? Once she falls asleep, unless someone puts a knife to her neck, she won't wake up easily. Where's the knife? Bring one over. Let's give it a try. Let's try it. The other team members were whispering and making small movements, while Xia Siming continued to lean her head against the seat, emitting soft snores. Just as the team members were discussing which knife to use, Xia Siming suddenly jolted awake from her dream. She shot out like a cannonball from the cannon, shattering the seatbelt on her body, leaving several afterimages, and dove headfirst into a suitcase 20 meters away, making a clattering sound. This scene completely stunned the other team members. Captain, did she seem to hear us? One team member asked weakly. She won't silence us, will she? Kong Shang looked at this scene, confusion filling his eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he walked over to the pile of suitcases in the center. Amidst the disordered luggage, a girl in a golden cloak lay dazed in the center, her eyes blankly staring at the ceiling, her face extremely pale. Captain, are you okay? Kong Shang asked tentatively. Xia Siming lay on the ground like a statue for a long time, opened her mouth and said hoarsely, I think I had a nightmare. Somewhere in Daxia. Several figures cloaked in gray hurriedly moved through the jungle. In the dense forest ahead of them, a massive shadow was rapidly advancing. Tianping, I will pause time in this area first. You fly over from above and then coordinate with me to block it, Wang Mian said, one hand resting on the hilt of the Yuan knife, turning to Tianping beside him. Tianping responded with a num, his figure floating up from the forest, quickly rushing toward the rapidly advancing shadow. Wang Mian took a deep breath. Everyone pay attention. Time pause countdown 3-2. Before he could finish, Wang Mian's body suddenly trembled and he froze in place. The other team members who were ready to act stopped upon seeing Wang Mian halt, looking at him in confusion. Captain, what's wrong? Qianwu asked. Wang Mian's hand gripping the knife hilt unconsciously tightened, and after a moment he slowly relaxed. I don't know, he shook his head. But I just feel something bad is about to happen. Shangjing City. Night Watcher Team 006's base. Xiaopinga, bored, sat behind his desk twirling a pen, lazily yawning. Across from him, Yuan Gang was bent over a pile of documents, writing furiously. Feeling sleepy? Yuan Gang asked, noticing the scene. Yeah, Xiaopinga replied honestly. Sleep a bit then? Xiaopinga raised an eyebrow. Isn't that inappropriate? After all, you're helping me with my work and I can't sleep in front of you. You still know this is your work? Yuan Gang shot him a glare, slamming his pen on the desk. It's been an entire afternoon. I've been here helping you revise documents while you've been yawning at me all afternoon. Doesn't your heart hurt? Xiaopinga was silent for a moment. My heart is doing just fine. Yuan Gang. Seeing Yuan Gang's face visibly darken, Xiaopinga cleared his throat, about to salvage their brotherly bond, when his finger suddenly slipped. The pen he was twirling fell to the ground. Thud. The pen hit the floor, creating a dent in the cap, then rolled away, finally coming to a stop in the darkness of the room's corner. Staring at the pen, Xiaopinga stood frozen in place. Daxia misty border. Jinian, cloaked in a cape, leaned against the hood of a supercar, hands tucked into the pockets of her cloak, gazing at the massive and magnificent mist wall before her, lost in thought. Suddenly, she furrowed her brow and instinctively turned her head in a certain direction. A look of confusion appeared in her eyes. After hesitating for a moment, she got into the car, pressed the accelerator and with a roar of the engine, crashed into the seemingly endless mist, disappearing without a trace. Inside the Buddhist hall, 6 heroic spirits stared blankly at the figure in black standing before the coffin, their eyes filled with shock and confusion. The person had their back to the black coffin, facing the seated Yi Fan in the center of the hall, silent and lost in thought. This is how things unfolded. After Li Qingqiang explained everything before him, he closed his mouth. After a long silence in the dead hall, the person slowly spoke. I understand. Thank you all. He stiffly turned around and walked toward the door of the Buddhist hall, looking lost. The midday sunlight streamed through the door crack, casting his shadow on the hall floor, making him appear unprecedentedly lonely and desolate. Creak. He reached out to push open the door of the Buddhist hall, and the blinding sunlight flooded in. He stood in the light for a long time, tears streaming down his cheeks, dripping onto the bluestone path beneath his feet. He clenched his fists tightly, then slowly relaxed, leaving the Buddhist hall alone. After he left, the 6 heroic spirits silently watched the direction he departed, not speaking for a long time. Finally, Wang Qing broke the silence. I don't understand. How can a quarter of a soul be so strong? In the center, the armored Hu Tubing gazed in the direction he left, slowly speaking. That is not a quarter of a soul. That is a complete sword immortal of the red dust. But shouldn't he have transcended? Why is his soul still intact? Tang Yuxing also expressed confusion. Hu Tubing lowered his head, looking at the ground, where the black skirt that originally wrapped the glass heart lay. Perhaps some things happened that we do not know about. Chapter 585. Bringing a message. Outside the Buddhist temple. Just now, what was that noise? Lu Wuwei frowned as he looked at the temple, asking in confusion. I don't know. Guanzai shook his head and turned to the side to look at Suqing. What did you mean when you said he was exchanging lives for my brother? Suqing had his back to them, his gaze fixed on the grand door of the temple, his fists tightly clenched, his eyes revealing deep sorrow and pain without answering the question. He knew that Yi Fan had succeeded. Creak. The door of the temple slowly opened, and a figure in black stood behind it, looking up at the golden sun in the sky, like a transcendent deity. Tears streamed down his cheeks, gently dripping onto the ground. In his chest, a glass-like heart was shining brightly. Seeing that face, both Lu Wuwei and Guanzai froze in place. Guanzai stared at him blankly, shock unprecedented in his eyes, his body trembling slightly, unable to control himself. Didn't they say he was dead? Guanzai croaked. Suqing remained silent. Guanzai snapped back to reality, quickly stepping up the last step, rushing toward the figure in front of the temple. This time Suqing did not stop him. Brother Zhou Ping, he shouted at the figure. Zhou Ping turned his head slightly. In the sunlight, his tear-streaked face was filled with guilt and sorrow. Brother Guanzai. Guanzai reached him, a sincere smile appearing on his face. Brother Zhou Ping, it's so good that you're okay. Zhou Ping was stunned for a long time, a hint of bitterness appearing in his eyes. He shook his head and said, Brother Guanzai, right now I want to be alone. Guanzai was taken aback. Zhou Ping lifted his right foot, gently stepping over the threshold of the temple. A barely noticeable flash of sword light cut through the space and he vanished from sight. Guanzai stood there in confusion. After Zhou Ping left, his gaze followed the temple door, looking inside. In the solemn and grand temple, the figures of the 6 spirits had already disappeared, leaving only a golden Buddha statue, eyes closed and smiling, quietly sitting on the ground, devoid of any vitality. Guanzai's pupils suddenly contracted. Shijin City. Sanjiu's rustic restaurant. The figure in black stepped out of the void, standing at the entrance of this small old rustic restaurant. This restaurant was located at the edge of an alley, its sign slightly yellowed from the wind and sun, and the menu posted at the door was tattered. Fortunately, the restaurant still had a good reputation among regular customers, and even though it was in a remote location, there were still patrons willing to come here occasionally for a meal. The door was wide open. Standing on the steps at the entrance, Zhou Ping could clearly hear several customers inside chatting and laughing, talking about how their child received some award at school yesterday, how the bricks at the construction site were particularly hot today, and how they planned to take their wife and child to a restaurant in the city center in a few days. But unfortunately, they didn't have any money in their pockets right now. The air was filled with rich aromas of food, the pungent scent of stir-fried green peppers and minced garlic, the sweet and greasy fragrance of rock candy and oil, the mouth-watering smell of onions stir-fried with meat. These aromas mixed with the customers' idle chatter, exuding a unique and comforting atmosphere. This was the atmosphere of the marketplace, the essence of the mundane world. This was his home. Zhou Ping stood at the bottom of the steps, watching his uncle busily cooking and serving dishes inside, feeling complex and heavy emotions. His uncle had just served a plate of stir-fried onions and meat to a customer. When he turned around, he saw Zhou Ping standing there like a fool on the steps, raising an eyebrow. "You brat, you still know how to come back?" His uncle grinned. Zhou Ping opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to say something, but nothing came out. Seeing Zhou Ping standing still, his uncle clicked his tongue. "What are you standing there for? Come in and help. There are a lot of customers today and I'm both the boss and the cook and the waiter right now. I'm so busy I could die." His uncle wiped his greasy hands on his apron, quickly walked down the steps, grabbed Zhou Ping's wrist and pulled him into the restaurant. As they walked, he chattered on, "You asked for a month off back then and it's been several months now. I thought you weren't coming back. I'll tell you in advance, I'm going to deduct 200 from your salary for these months. And that guy named you found to replace you isn't reliable either. He helped for less than a month and secretly ran away, couldn't even wash the dishes properly or sweep the floor. I don't know what else he could do. My nephew is still the best." Zhou Ping was pulled into the restaurant, and then his uncle let go of him and quickly walked into the kitchen, leaving him standing there somewhat at a loss. "Hey, Xiao Zhou is back." A regular customer who had just arrived saw Zhou Ping and smiled. "Order me some stir-fried greens and stir-fried bamboo shoots with shredded meat. Tell your uncle to put more meat in it." Zhou Ping instinctively picked up the order pad from the small table and noted down the 2 dishes with a ballpoint pen, then quickly headed toward the kitchen. Amidst the fragrant stir-fried dishes and laughter, everything seemed to return to normal. There were indeed quite a few customers today. By the time Zhou Ping finished his tasks and sat at a table, it was nearly 2 o'clock. He sat at a table near the door, his rolled-up sleeves still not lowered, staring blankly at the alley outside and the sky at the end of the alley, lost in thought. His uncle walked out of the kitchen, saw Zhou Ping in a daze and after a moment of silence walked back into the kitchen. At that moment, a figure appeared at the entrance of the rustic restaurant. Zhou Ping suddenly froze upon seeing the person. Suqing, dressed in casual clothes, walked up the steps of the restaurant at a leisurely pace, pushed open the door and walked in. "It's you." Zhou Ping recognized Suqing. Suqing smiled slightly, turned to glance at the menu beside him and said, "Could you order me a plate of scrambled eggs with tomatoes? And a bowl of rice?" Zhou Ping paused. "Sure." He stood up to take the written order to the kitchen, while Suqing sat alone at an empty table, sitting up straight and surveying his surroundings. Before long, Zhou Ping returned with a plate of food and a large bowl of rice. He placed the dish in front of Suqing and quietly sat down across from him. "How did you know I was here?" Zhou Ping asked. Suqing pulled a pair of chopsticks from a nearby basket, poured the scrambled eggs with tomatoes over the rice, and stirred it while saying, "The only place you could go is here." "I know. I shouldn't have left at this time, but..." Zhou Ping paused, a look of distress appearing in his eyes. "I'm feeling very confused right now." "I understand," Suqing nodded. "I came here just to bring you a few words." "Words? What Yifan wants to say to you." Chapter 586, His Choice. Zhou Ping's body trembled slightly as he looked into Suqing's eyes. Suqing cleared his throat and using Yifan's tone slowly said, "Zhou Ping, you don't need to feel guilty or think you owe me anything. Swapping lives was a decision I made on my own. You don't have to bear any responsibility for it. After I die, Suqing will seal off the news of my life swap and claim it was a self-immolation. No one will know you are still alive, no one will pay attention to you and no one will force you to fulfill any so-called duties. You have already died once for me and for the great Xia. Now I return my life to you. You can choose to be yourself and live the life you want. In this life, you are no longer the sword saint of great Xia. You don't have to live for anyone else. Whether you stay at that local restaurant and work as a waiter or find a kind and gentle woman to marry and start a family, you can do anything you want. If one day Great Xia truly faces a catastrophic crisis, perhaps you can step in and help within your means. if you are willing. As Suiqing's words fell, Zhou Ping lowered his head, falling into silence. Suiqing said no more, quietly finishing his meal. Once he had cleaned his bowl of food, he left a few bills on the table and slowly stood up. I've already brought Yi Fan's words to you. I won't disturb you again. Goodbye. With that, Suiqing turned and pushed open the door of the restaurant, disappearing into the alley. Zhou Ping stared at the empty plate and bowl in front of him, not getting up to clean up, just sitting there quietly, lost in thought. He never expected to return in this way, nor did he anticipate that Yi Fan would sacrifice her life to save him. After hearing the details from several heroic spirits, his mind felt like a muddled mess, and he couldn't express the discomfort in his heart. Sacrificing Yi Fan to regain his life was not what he wanted. But everything had already happened. Zhou Ping's mind was in chaos. The fragrant aroma of the dishes suddenly wafted into his nostrils, pulling his scattered thoughts back. He turned his head and saw his third uncle standing beside him, holding 2 dishes and a soup. Third uncle, Zhou Ping said blankly. Unhurriedly, his third uncle placed the dishes on the table in front of him, handed him a pair of chopsticks, and then sat down across from him, gently blowing on the steam rising from his old cadre's teacup. Eat up. You've been away from home for so long. You must be missing the home-cooked meals, right? He said with a smile. Zhou Ping gazed at the steaming dishes in front of him, feeling a bit dazed. He picked up the chopsticks and nodded slightly. Eat more. Okay. Zhou Ping picked up a few dishes and began to eat quietly. The familiar environment, the familiar person, the familiar taste. For a moment, Zhou Ping even felt as if he had returned to a few months ago, to that peaceful time. You've been busy outside for so long. Are you tired? His third uncle asked, looking at Zhou Ping. Tired. The outside world is always more tiring than home. His third uncle paused. So, do you want to go back? Zhou Ping's hand, which was holding the chopsticks, paused slightly. I don't know, he said bitterly. His third uncle held the teacup, looking at him for a long time before breaking into a grin. Actually, I've already planned your future path. You don't like to talk and you're clumsy in the kitchen. It seems you won't inherit this restaurant. I've thought it through. Once I earn enough money and this place is about to close, we'll sell the restaurant and buy 2 small apartments of about 100 square meters in the suburbs. One for you to marry and start a family and one for me to retire. With a house, you can work wherever you want or change jobs to be a waiter. It doesn't matter. We don't need to earn too much money. Shijin isn't a big city. As long as we earn enough to live and for you to get married, that's enough. By then I'll find a few matchmakers from our village to set you up with a wife. She doesn't need to be too beautiful, but she must be virtuous, able to take care of you and be filial. After all, I have no children, and when I grow old and alone I can only rely on you too. In a few years, when I'm at home with nothing to do, I can cook a couple of dishes, bring some roast chicken and beer to visit you too, have a drink, chat and help take care of the kids. Isn't that nice? We don't aim to make a fortune or stand out. We just want to live our lives steadily. As Zhou Ping ate, he imagined the future his third uncle described, a faint smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. His third uncle took a sip of tea and continued, young people often feel lost when facing challenges. That's normal. It takes time to settle and think things through. But the most important thing is to ask yourself what your true heart desires. What I've just said is merely my own fantasy. You're already grown up. You don't have to be bound by my thoughts. Your future path must be walked by you. If you want to stay and live a stable life, I can guarantee you won't be wronged in this city. If you want to leave and venture out, I might not be able to help you, but if one day you get tired of wandering and come back here, I can still arrange everything for you properly. His third uncle, holding the old cadre's teacup, spoke confidently, as if at that moment he was no longer just a small restaurant owner but a significant figure in Shijin City. Zhou Ping finished all the food, put down his chopsticks, and for some reason his eyes felt a bit moist. He raised his head and looked at the sky outside the door, a complex expression flashing in his eyes. True heart. He extended his hand and gently placed it on his chest, as if asking himself what kind of life he truly wanted. To live steadily in the suburbs, marry, have children and pass his life peacefully. At that moment numerous images flashed through his mind. In the dim underground parking lot, several people stood behind him, bowing deeply and saying in unison, "Please, Sword Saint of Great Xia, slay the gods. In the mist, Lin Chier and others rode clouds, traversing between the dual gods, smiling and telling him not to doubt or fear, for he was the one walking at the forefront of humanity. In the grand and majestic Buddhist hall, the golden Buddha sitting on the ground gazed at the black coffin, smiling silently. His chest, that glazed heart, beat powerfully. This body, crafted for him to bear the power of the laws, gently trembled with the heartbeat of the glazed heart, as if anticipating something. After a moment, Zhou Ping's eyes gradually brightened. His heart, his body, his laws, and his sword, all of this existed not for him to hide away in the suburbs and quietly spend the rest of his life. Everything about him was born to slay the gods. If he buried his head in the ground, ignoring the imminent crises around him, wanting to preserve himself and live out his life, what difference would that make from escaping reality? His sword, heart, and his body meant for slaying gods would never agree to that. Chapter 587. Who opposes? It seems you've made your choice, Uncle San said with a smile, sensing the change in Zhou Ping's demeanor. Zhou Ping sat in the chair for a long time before finally speaking up. It probably won't stay. Uncle San didn't seem surprised by this answer. In fact, he looked quite pleased, his mouth breaking into a wide grin. Uncle San, what are you laughing at? Zhou Ping asked, puzzled. Actually, if you had said you wanted to stay, I would have felt a bit disappointed, Uncle San replied with a smile. Staying would mean your life revolves only around this little restaurant and me, this old man nearing 50. Your world is too small, and that's not a good thing. On the contrary, your choice to leave means you've found a place more suitable for you than this humble restaurant. A place where you can shine with your own light. Zhou Ping, you have grown. Zhou Ping stared at Uncle San, momentarily frozen in place. He pressed his lips together, stood up from the chair, and deeply bowed to the old man who had raised him. Thank you, Uncle San. No need to thank me. I'm just doing what an elder should do. Uncle San also stood up, casually waved his hand to clear away the empty bowls and chopsticks in front of Zhou Ping, and stepped toward the kitchen. From now on, I'll wash the dishes myself. You should go to where you belong. When you get tired of your adventures, come back and Uncle San will cook for you. With that, Uncle San's figure disappeared behind the kitchen curtain. Zhou Ping watched him leave for a long time before slowly turning around to take one last look at the small, old restaurant. He pushed the door open and stepped out. Shoujing City. Night Watch Headquarters. What? Yifan has passed away. At the empty conference table, a senior member of the Night Watch stood up in shock upon receiving the news. The other senior members were equally stunned, remaining silent for a long time before erupting into frantic discussions. How did Yifan suddenly pass away? I don't know, there were no signs at all. Was he injured during the battle against the outer gods in the South China Sea? Why didn't he say anything? It's too sudden, how could a human pinnacle just... Indeed, there was no time for us to prepare. With Commander Yi gone, who will take over the position of Night Watch Commander? The champion who founded the Exorcism Division set a rule. Only those who reach the human pinnacle can become the commander. But now there hasn't been a second pinnacle-level powerhouse among the Night Watch. We can only select an acting commander from the senior members. Xiaopinga sat to the side, listening to the conversations among the other senior members, feeling somewhat dazed. Yifan has passed away. He still couldn't process the shock brought by this news. He was a junior to Yifan, having risen from an ordinary Night Watch member to a senior position, becoming the head of the Human Resources Department and the national commander of the Night Watch teams, all thanks to Yifan's support. Yifan had shown him great favor. And now he was dead? He couldn't absorb a single word of the discussions among the senior members. He felt like a statue sitting there, completely motionless. There was another young senior member like him, and their commonality was that they had both been promoted by Yifan. Most of those arguing over the acting commander's position were older senior members from the previous generation. While everyone was in a heated debate, Suqing pushed the door open and entered. He had changed into the Night Watch cloak and walked straight to the front of the conference table. His calm gaze swept over the noisy conference room as he slammed a document onto the table. Bang! The conference room fell silent immediately. Suqing, what are you doing? A senior member frowned and asked. Suqing glanced at him and calmly said, From today onward I will temporarily take over as the Night Watch commander. Until a second pinnacle-level Night Watch member appears, I will be fully responsible for all matters of the night watch. Upon hearing this, the older senior members furrowed their brows. Suiqing, you've only been a senior member for a few years. Isn't it a bit too early to take on the commander's role? Before Commander Yi passed away, he left a document designating the acting commander. If you have doubts about this decision, feel free to review it, Suiqing said, pulling out a document and handing it to the senior members. Several senior members took the document and began to read it carefully, their brows furrowing even tighter. Meanwhile, the other two young senior members, including Xiao Pinga, didn't even look at the document. They were close to Yi Fan and naturally knew that Yi Fan had been grooming Suiqing as his successor, so it was no surprise to see this decision. After confirming the authenticity of the document, the senior members sighed helplessly and quietly sat back down. Since the document left by Yi Fan designated Suiqing's acting position, they had no grounds to oppose it. After all, they were all part of the night watch and needed to follow the rules. However, one senior member was not willing to let it go. He was a man in his 50s holding the document in his hand. He glanced at it and then sneered, saying, "This document is forged." At this statement, the expressions of everyone present changed. Suiqing's eyes turned icy. "He Xingxing, do you know what you're saying?" Another senior member beside him frowned. "What? Is that not a possibility?" He Xingxing tossed the document onto the table, staring into Suiqing's eyes as he slowly spoke. "Suiqing is so close to Yi Fan. Getting Yi Fan's private seal wouldn't be difficult. Who can prove that this document was indeed written by Yi Fan?" As his words fell, the brows of the young senior members, including Xiao Pinga, furrowed in unison. The other senior members exchanged glances, their eyes flickering with uncertainty, clearly wavering. Suiqing fixed his gaze on He Xingxing, coldly asking, "How do you want me to prove it?" "I don't care how you prove it, but if you can't provide solid evidence, then this document is naturally invalid," He Xingxing replied indifferently. "Without this document, the selection for the acting commander can only be done through a vote among the senior members." Among the 7 senior members present, only Xiao Pinga, Suiqing, and another young senior member were originally promoted by Yi Fan. If the other 3 senior members were swayed by He Xingxing to vote, the situation would be very unfavorable for them. The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became tense. At that moment, the door to the conference room was suddenly pushed open. Everyone was taken aback and turned to look at the figure in black entering, their eyes filled with shock. "Couldn't be." The figure in black calmly walked to the front of the conference table, reached into thin air and pulled out the dragon elephant sword, plunging it into the center of the conference room. Clay. The sword's aura was chilling. The figure in black stood there, scanning the crowd with a calm gaze, and spoke lightly. "I recommend Suiqing as the acting commander of the Night Watch. Who among you opposes?" Chapter 588. Finding My Student. Feeling the terrifying sword energy rushing towards him, all the high-ranking officials silently swallowed their saliva. He Xingwen stared blankly at the young figure and the powerful aura faintly emanating from him, completely petrified in place. Wasn't it said that Zhou Ping had transcended to the divine realm? How did he suddenly appear here again? Was this false information left by Yi Fan? Not only them but even Suiqing, who stood beside Zhou Ping, was equally astonished. He had just returned from his uncle's restaurant, and he originally thought that after delivering Yi Fan's message, Zhou Ping would quietly stay there for the rest of his life. He never expected that in such a short time he would rush to the Night Watch headquarters, explicitly demanding to take over as the acting commander. This was not what he had anticipated. "Zhou Ping, this is our internal matter in the Night Watch. You shouldn't." He Xingwen swallowed hard, wanting to point out that Zhou Ping had no right to intervene in this matter, but as soon as he began to speak, that calm gaze fell upon him. Zhou Ping's eyes narrowed slightly, exuding a hint of killing intent. He Xingwen's body trembled. In that instant he felt his mind go blank, an endless tide of sword energy flooding into his brain, and his consciousness felt like a leaf drifting in the sea, frantically shredded by the sword energy with no room for resistance. He was nearly suffocating from the pain. Fortunately, Zhou Ping's gaze lingered on him for only half a second before he lightly turned to look at the others. Coming back to his senses from this purgatory of sword energy, He Xingwen's face turned pale, his back drenched in sweat. He felt his legs go weak, collapsing into his seat as if he had been drained of strength. Seeing He Xingwen collapse, everyone realized the situation was dire. Except for Xiao Pinga and another young executive, the others dared not meet Zhou Ping's eyes. Zhou Ping spoke. "I'll ask again, who opposes?" The conference room fell into a deathly silence. He Xingwen, who had just been petrified by Zhou Ping's gaze, had no strength left to speak, and seeing He Xingwen in such a sorry state, the other executives naturally abandoned any thoughts of joining him in madness, sitting quietly without a word. Zhou Ping nodded, then it settled. After saying this, he turned and walked out of the conference room. Suiqing stood there in a daze for a moment before realizing what had happened and quickly chased after Zhou Ping. Before attending the meeting, Suiqing had anticipated that the hardliners might try to play tricks on him, so he had prepared some backup plans. However, he never expected that before he could use those tactics, Zhou Ping had come in and casually settled the position of acting commander with just a few words. To avoid the other executives, the two walked all the way to the rooftop before Suiqing couldn't help but ask, "Why did you come back? Didn't you say I could do what I wanted?" Zhou Ping replied, "This is what I want to do." Suiqing's expression was somewhat strange. "What you want to do is to make me the acting commander? That's just a side benefit." Zhou Ping looked into his eyes. "Since Yi Fan chose to trust you, I will trust you too. You're just a little short of breaking through to the next level. Until then, I'll be your support. Just like Yi Fan was my support back then." Suiqing was silent for a moment. "Thank you. No need to thank me. It seems that the high-ranking officials of the Night Watch are not a solid block. Even if I'm your support, I can't interfere too much in the Night Watch's affairs. You'll have to handle those yourself." "I understand." A fierce look appeared in Suiqing's eyes. Some people have been comfortable at the top for too long and forget their identities. Yi Fan's methods were too gentle before, but I won't be like that. Once I take over the Night Watch, I will deal with them one by one. As long as you know in your heart. By the way, what would you have done if someone had really opposed just now? Opposed? Then let them oppose. Zhou Ping shrugged. "I can't just kill them at the Night Watch headquarters." Suiqing continued to ask, "So what do you plan to do next?" Zhou Ping looked up at the distance, silent for a moment, then slowly spoke. "Enter the mist." "Enter the mist? What for?" "To find my students." Zhou Ping said calmly, "I've heard about their situation. Since they went missing in the mist, I will find them one by one. But you don't even know where they are. When they entered the mist to save me, they didn't know where I was either. The mist is so vast, where will you look? They disappeared near the border of Daxiao. It should be the work of some foreign god." A determined look appeared in Zhou Ping's eyes. "Since it's the work of a foreign god, I'll search through each divine realm one by one. No matter how far I have to go, I will bring them back." "Invade a divine realm?" A hint of surprise flashed in Suiqing's eyes. After a moment he asked, "What if they have already?" Zhou Ping did not speak, but a cold, killing intent flickered in his eyes. "If they have already been killed, I will take down that entire divine realm to accompany them in death." After a long pause he said coldly. Suiqing closed his mouth. Zhou Ping glanced at him and said, "I don't know when I'll be back after I leave. During this time the Night Watch will be in your hands. Don't worry, I will manage the Night Watch well." Suiqing took a deep breath, clasping his hands together. "Safe travels." Zhou Ping nodded slightly, stepping in a certain direction, and with one step he vanished. Ding! His figure transformed into a streak of sword light, piercing through the void in an instant, charging towards the edge of the mist without hesitation. Mist. Olympus. Under the gloomy sky, dense thunder roamed through the clouds, emitting a low rumbling sound. Several bolts of lightning slashed through the air like ferocious giant snakes, illuminating a corner of the world. Above the surging, rolling waves, a massive mountain range, straddling the line between illusion and reality, was cast in a ghastly white. Deep within this mountain range, a golden throne stood firmly atop the peaks. On this golden throne sat an old man, bare-chested and brimming with explosive muscles, who suddenly opened his eyes, gazing towards a certain direction in the world. The golden scepter in his hand trembled violently. Along with it, the entire Olympus trembled. In the distance, a deep red nightfall was rapidly consuming the sky, like a sword from the night, its blade pointing directly at Olympus. Beneath that deep red nightfall, a woman draped in a starry veil, wielding a humming longsword, was slowly walking through the void. She looked at the grand mountain range in the distance, and the fire of vengeance burned fiercely in her eyes. She parted her lips slightly, murmuring to herself, "Olympus, I have returned."